Here's a way to write some amazing speech sentences. You can always start with your speech. Do you think Mrs. Jonas will like my sentence could be said out loud? If it's being said out loud, just like any other normal sentence, it must start with a capital letter and it must finish with some kind of punctuation mark. Here I've used a question mark as it's a question. Once you've got your sentence complete, you can put your speech marks at the beginning and also after that last punctuation mark. Notice it has to go after and not before. Now at the moment we don't know who's speaking, so I'm going to add a very simple finish to this sentence and it's going to say, said John. A little bit boring because we don't know how John's speaking. So in the next screen we're going to change that. Same sentence again. Do you think Mrs. Jonas will like my sentence? Said John. Now if John's feeling a little bit anxious about wanting approval of his sentence, then we might not use said. He might be speaking in quite a quiet voice, so we could change this to whispered. Make sure that you choose your alternative to the said word carefully. You wouldn't put shouted here because everybody would hear it. So choose one appropriately. Moving on, we have, do you think Mrs. Jonas will like my sentence? Whispered John. Now, he might be feeling a little bit anxious, so what we could do is add an adverb on the end. Let's get rid of that full stop and then we can put down nervously. That just gives an added element where we know how John is speaking. He's whispering and it also tells us he's feeling nervous. Now, if you feel like pushing yourself to the limit, you can actually improve your speech sentence even further by twisting it around and starting with who is speaking and how they're speaking. So, here we go. I could write nervously as my opening word. Now, when you start with an adverb opener, you can put a comma. Then I'll say who's speaking. John whispered. And because the speech is coming at the end of the sentence, you could use a comma to introduce it, but I quite like the idea of putting a colon in. It's a very advanced form of punctuation. After the colon, put your speech marks, and then do you think Mrs. Jonas will like my sentence? Same punctuation rules at the end, put your question mark in and finish with your speech marks. So, nervously, John whispered, do you think Mrs. Jonas will like my sentence? This is a better way of writing speech because you get to use your lovely colon. Also, you've got an adverb opener which comes at the beginning. Okay, so just an alternative way to write that speech sentence. Nervously, John whispered, do you think Mrs. Jonas will like my sentence? Well, yes, I think she will.